The pawn shop owner called while I was folding laundry. Socks half matched, TV murmuring to itself. Almost didn't answer, because the number was unfamiliar, and I'd trained myself not to expect things back once they were gone. "Ma'am," he said, careful like he was stepping onto ice. "You need to come in. There's something about the watch." Hadn't heard anyone call it the watch in years. It had been my dad's Rolex, the only thing he left me that wasn't already spoken for by someone louder, needier, or more entitled. When he died, my stepbrother took the truck, the tools, even the old photos he said he wanted to digitize. The watch stayed on my wrist because I wore it to the funeral and never took it off. Until I did. My stepbrother called it dead money. He had charts on his phone, words like blockchain and liquidity that he said with a grin that implied I was already behind. Promised he'd buy it back in 6 months. He said I was being emotional. He said Dad would have wanted it put to use. Let him pawn it. Because I was tired. Because I didn't know how to fight without crying. Because I wanted to believe that someone else's confidence could substitute for my caution. 6 months turned into silence. The startup vanished the way smoke does, no apology, no explanation, just a shrug when I finally cornered him at a family barbecue. "Didn't work out," he said, mouthful of ribs. "You want me to feel bad forever." I did what I always did. I folded the feeling smaller. I told myself it was just a watch. The pawn shop smelled like metal and dust. Owner was older than I remembered, his hands steady in a way that suggested patience rather than slowness. He didn't bring the watch out right away. Instead, he asked me to sit. "We don't open watches," he said. "Not unless there's a reason." This one had a reason. He explained that during a routine inspection, insurance, liability, things I'd never considered, his appraiser noticed inconsistencies. Weight, balance. The kind of thing only someone who'd handled thousands of watches would catch. Inside the casing, behind a panel designed to look like part of the mechanism, there was a folded strip of paper sealed in wax so old it had darkened. Alongside it, a microfilm capsule no longer than a fingernail. He didn't hand them to me. He slid them across the counter like evidence. "There are regulations," he said gently. Items contain concealed documents, especially ones tied to property or identity. We're required to notify the appropriate offices. Already done that. I felt the floor shift, not dramatically, more like a slow realization that something I'd assumed was simple never had been. The letter was my father's handwriting. Careful. Deliberate. The kind he used when he didn't want to be misunderstood. He wrote about a parcel of land I'd never heard of, about a business partner who'd disappeared, about signatures he hadn't trusted at the time. He wrote that he was tired, didn't have the energy to fight anymore, and that the watch was the only place he was sure no one would look. Not my stepmother, not her son, not even me unless I needed to know. The microfilm corroborated it all. Deeds, transfers, proof that what he'd lost publicly, he'd preserved quietly. The authority arrived in the form of a woman in a navy blazer with a county seal stitched onto the pocket. She spoke plainly. She asked me questions that had answers. She explained next steps without drama. She told me the watch could not be sold, would remain in evidence until ownership and intent were clarified. My stepbrother called me before I called him. Word travels fast when paperwork starts moving. "You didn't tell me," he said, accusing, almost frightened. "There was stuff in there." "Didn't know," I said, and for once it was the whole truth. He wanted access. He wanted assurances. He wanted me to tell the official that he'd only meant to help, that he'd had no idea what he was pawning. I listened, said I would cooperate fully. I did not offer comfort. In the weeks that followed, learned things about my father that complicated my grief. He hadn't been naive. He'd been strategic. He hadn't trusted easily, been right not to. The watch wasn't a sentimental heirloom. It was a container, a decision. My stepbrother's involvement became a footnote, his signature on a pawn slip, his timing unfortunate. There were consequences, mostly professional, the kind that close doors quietly. No courtroom spectacle, no shouting, just calls not returned and opportunities that evaporated. When the watch was finally returned to me, it felt heavier than before. Positive, not because of what was inside, it was empty now, but because I understood it differently. I didn't put it on right away. At a family gathering months later, my stepbrother asked if I was going to sell it. His tone was careful, measured. "No," I said, "it's done enough work." He nodded, like someone acknowledging a boundary he hadn't seen before. Still fold laundry the same way. I still avoid unknown numbers. Some habits don't change. But when I think about what my father left me, don't think about value anymore. I think about restraint. About choosing the right hiding place. About how power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits.